Hi there and welcome back to Triplicate, and before we move on with the task in hand, a bit of channel news. Triplicate has hit over 1,000 subscribers, which I never thought would happen, so thank you all, you know who you are. And on that note, let's, without further ado, get on. And today we're back on the Heresy Synthesizer, and I guess more channel news. I noticed that the last couple of videos on the Heresy have gone up from sort of tens of views to hundreds of views, so it seems like there are people out there who feel the same way about synthesizers for the past 20-30 years that I do, which is heartening to know. And yeah, no, they haven't plugged in either. Will be in a minute. So there are probably people joining this series of videos who have not seen the earlier ones. So for you, the idea behind this synthesizer was that it should have no keyboard, no ugly row of black and white switches, no MIDI, no 5-pin DIN, no keyboard mindset built in, not to mention 1980s mindset, and it should have no, well, we'll call them waveform generators, what are conventionally called oscillators, and no filters and no envelopes and LFOs and etc., and all the other things that synthesizers all seem to have. And finally, we're going to try and build into it a little bit of attitude, but that will come later. So in the last video we were trying to add a little noise to our sound generation engine, I suppose we call it, which is the bowed bottle model. I won't go through all that again, it's in the last video, but a violin bow scrapes along the string and generates noise, and if you blow into a wind instrument your breath creates noise, so we're going to try and put some noise into our instrument because I believe it makes the sound a bit richer. A bit less antiseptic like a synthesizer. However, we had a problem and it was making a nasty crackling noise. So let's see if we can cure that for a start. Okay, so I looked at the code and found that the fairly obvious bug that was causing the nasty crackling noise and fixed that. So here we are, this is with no noise on. And this is with noise on. I think you can see by looking at that. Whoopsie daisy. So there is something going wrong with something somewhere. So that's the next job. Find out what the hell's happening there. Okay, this is the little diagram I drew of our bowed bottle system for the last video, and I don't see why I should draw it again. So here it is, and this is the important bit. This is the force on our mass on a spring. So I realise I've got this wrong here, because imagine the situation where the instrument is quiet and the bow is not moving. Delta V is the speed of the bow relative to the mass on the spring. Got another diagram here when my hand is in the way, but never mind. If the instrument is quiet, the mass on the string is stationary and the bow is stationary, so delta V is 0, so surely at this point there should be no force, and there is a force. So my equation for the force relative to the velocity difference between the bow and the mass, my equation is wrong, so that is the first thing I need to put right. Okay, so I've gone back to my test program because it's a lot easier to diagnose what's going on, and I've got it to print out the new drive curve, bow drive curve, versus the old one. So the red is the old one and the blue is the new one. So for small, the X is the velocity difference between the bow and the mass on the spring. So yeah, quite a high force, positive and negative, with the bow when the mass is sticking to the bow, and down to 0 for when the mass is not sticking to the bow. Don't know whether I should leave that like that. So yes, this section is half a sine wave and these two sections are both half a cosine wave, and that's the code that does it. But I'm not going to bore you with code at this point, so we'll fire it up. Bow bottle, and off it goes. It throws out a bunch of numbers, come on, which represent several cycles. So this is actually working. It's driving the bow bottle, and I did run it before and grab those numbers and put them in a spreadsheet. So just think it's worth running through this in a bit more detail here. So the blue is the output, which looks surprisingly like a sine wave, and the orange is the mass speed. The yellow is the bow speed, which is constant, just for test purposes. And the green is the difference in speed, and you can see here it's the bow is pretty much holding the mass, and here the mass is swinging freely. So from that we get the drive, which does this curious thing. So here the bow is holding the mass and there's quite a high force, and then it lets go and there's virtually no force. Hope that makes sense. And finally we can have a look at what that comes out like in audio terms. Okay. It's quite a low pitch, that's just where I've set the pitch to. Alright. Okay, not too exciting, but it shows it is working and producing audio. Okay, so now I think we will try putting our noise on in this test program, because it'll be easier to diagnose if it goes loopy. Plus, we need to actually think a bit more carefully about how our noise is going to be integrated into our, I suppose, model. Okay, noise. Well, I've gone for, in the end, a simple solution where we have the drive according to the graph we've just described, and we add to it an amount of noise which is scaled to the velocity difference, which is the speed of the mass relative to the bow. So here we have our new drive versus velocity difference, and here we have it with noise, and you can see the noise. There's not much noise where it's the bow is holding the string. And sorry, my terminology is all over the place. I should sit down and work out some consistent terminology. Anyway, where the bow and the string are moving fast relative to each other, we get quite a lot of noise. And if we look at that, again with this rather complicated graph, so the brown trace is the drive, so here the bow is pulling the string and here it isn't, and the drive has the noise on it. So shall we see how that does? Okay, so I've actually changed it to be pitched quite high now, so I can do a direct comparison with me just whistling like that. So here we have it with no noise on. Oop. And you can hear we're getting a second tone. Now, I don't actually mind it doing some slightly unpredictable things. That's my gripe with synthesizers, is they're too predictable. And that has no noise on, so now let us put some noise on. Off we go. Right. Oh. Okay, so this is where we're setting our pitch, called pitch bow, and that's MIDI note number. So 84 is that one we've just tried, which did something very funny. So let's try 82. Doesn't sound brilliant, but it runs. Okay, let's try 83. Oh, that runs and then dies. See what it sounds like. Okay, well, I think we need to investigate what's going on there and why it's suddenly falling over and stopping working. Okay, sorry about this rather complex graph again. Well, it does everyone tell us what we need to know. So this is the point where it dies, and you can see this time around, this cycle, our delta V here goes to 0 and stays near 0 for all this time, at which time the bow is actually pulling the mass along. Okay, and it gets to the next cycle and the delta V doesn't stay near 0, so it's not actually pulling the mass along. So now the mass is freewheeling and it decays away, and once the velocity the bottle, what I've called mass velocity, bottle velocity, I really need to sort my terminology out, gets below here at all times at this point, then the bow is never going to pull it, and it's just going to sit there and just get the noise element. So that's why it's dying there now. Okay, so here I've gone back to pitch of 82, the one that doesn't drop out, and the one that, however, sounds crackly, like a rather bad recording of a train whistle, however. And if we go into here, this shows a section of that, and if we notice here, you can see we get our typical bit where the velocity difference between the bow and the mass is basically very close to zero for that section, and similarly here and similarly here. But here it isn't. It does what we saw it did when shortly before it died. So we have the drive is driving it, not driving it, and that, I believe, is where the crackling is coming from, that just occasional cycle where it's behaving differently. So let's see if we can do something about that. Okay, well, this video up to now represents about 2 weeks work, done a lot of work off camera and edited quite heavily what I've got, and a lot of scribbles and printouts and more scribbles and more scribbles and more scribbles and more scribbles and lots more that I'm not going to show you. And we seem to have hit a bit of a problem in that if the bow is travelling and the string is not, then they will never go the same speed. You see, what is happening is, when the bow in a violin, when the bow and the string are the same speed, the string sticks to the bow and the bow just gives it a little kick. Every cycle it gets a little kick off the bow. But as I say, if the string is stationary and the bow is moving, it'll never be, the speeds will never match and it'll never get a kick. And I don't know how a violin overcomes that. So I thought about buying a cheap violin, and you can buy a very cheap violin off eBay. And then I remembered I have a friend who plays the violin, so I was thinking of going round with him and to his house and making some recordings. But as I say, 2 weeks here, and then we're not trying to make a violin. We're just trying to use the ideas out of a real instrument to guide our synthesizer design. So, what's happening? Well, as I said, every cycle the bow gives the string a little kick. So all we want to do is give our string a little kick every cycle. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. The x-axis here is the velocity of the mass on the spring, and the y-axis is the amount of drive. So when the velocity is just quite small and positive, we're going to give it a little kick. So any movement at all, it'll go, and so that'll get rid of our problem of the bow moving and in this case, mass not. And also down here, we've shifted this is one cycle of a cosine curve. We've shifted it a little, so if the mass is not moving, it does get a little bit of a kick, so it'll start it off. And we're going to try varying the height of this kick and hopefully then we can use that to control the amplitude of our sine wave, the oscillations of our mass on our spring. And if we look at how it actually works in practice, yep, this is with no noise on, but we can see when the bottle, the mass velocity is just positive, it gets a little kick. So that's here and here, when the mass first starts moving upwards and towards the top of its movement. So let's see how that works in practice. Okay, so here it is with no noise, and I put 440 Hertz A in it, and it works. Let's have a listen. But as you can see, the idea of increasing the amplitude of the drive to control the level of the sound kind of doesn't work. It does nothing, then comes mostly on and just increases a little bit. So we have a problem there. Anyway, now let's put the noise back on and see if that is doing anything good. Okay, so I've put the noise back in. We've still got on this side the drive level, so the amplitude should come in linearly over that period, and it isn't, but we're going to forget about that for now and just see what this sounds like. Okay, still not entirely happy with the noise, and as I say, we have this control of the level, the problem with the control of the level. But given the amount of time I've spent on this video, I am going to call that a cautious win for now, and I'm going to put it back in our main synthesizer code and see how it actually sounds doing something musical. Not my best playing, never mind. And the user interface, the player interface, still seems to be doing some slightly odd things, and I think that is what we will have another look at next time. And this video seems to have been taken an awful long time and not got very far. I mean, to me it's been 2 weeks, though to you it's been 20 some minutes. And that's research and development, or rather the research part of that, where you can just not get anywhere. And I think we've learned quite a lot. We've moved on mentally, if not actually moved on in terms of functionality. So yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. Oh, we will keep picking away at it, keep plodding on at it, and in the end we might even not produce anything any good, but it's something I've always wanted to do, so I have the time, so I'm going to keep on at it. And it's nice to see some people are interested in what I'm doing and what I might achieve. Anyway, enough rambling, that is it for this video. So for now it is goodbye from Triplicate. Goodbye.